Hi, my name is Paige Alfonso, and I'm a UX researcher at YouTube. For today's chat relay, I had the honor and privilege of talking with James Lang, who is the UX Director of Research at YouTube. Hope you like it. All right, hi James, welcome.
Hello Paige, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So to kick off this next installment of the chat relay, I wanted to just see if you could tell us about your role at YouTube.
Sure. So my role at YouTube is that I'm the UX Research Director for creators. So this is one half of YouTube. It's concerned with the lives, the work, the aspirations of YouTube creators, the people that make videos on the platform. And what I do is work with a very talented team of researchers who spend their time surveying, doing ethnography, interviewing, and other forms of interaction with creators in order to understand their world. So what's it like to be a creator? What are their pain points? What could we do to support them better? We use all that to then build a better product for them. So that's where the YouTube Studio product comes from.
So I guess building on that a little bit is like you have a lot of knowledge about UX and you know that people come from a diversity of different backgrounds to get into the field. So what about you? What brought you into UX?
I think my path is typical in the sense that there wasn't a very clear path. It was very indirect, looking back, a bit of a zigzag. And it wasn't obvious that I would end up in this field that we call UX now, but I'm so glad that I did. The journey really was through a number of jobs that were nothing at all to do with research. I then found myself working in other forms of research, so social research, working with refugees in Greece. I was a marketing researcher working with product launches and product design in that field. And then eventually I found myself working more and more with technology and realized that it was what I loved, understanding the way that people interact with technology. And I've been here ever since. But it was only really in hindsight that I realized that the field was called UX. And I guess it was because at that time, it was a relatively new discipline. And so it's been a great journey just to be part of that experience of UX, really discovering what it is and what our practice looks like.
And do you think so? People come from a diversity of different backgrounds, but then once you're in the field of UX, do you think it's something you stay in, or are there other career paths that maybe having skills in UX is particularly maybe amenable for?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think UX is more than one field in a sense. I think it's an aggregation of many kinds of skill, many job titles that are closely related, but actually all have their own areas of interest, their own nuance. And for me, one of the most fascinating things about being in UX is that you can wear different hats over time. So when I came into the field, I was a researcher, but I found the work that designers and product managers did really fascinating. And so I tried to spend as much time as possible learning what they did, trying to practice some of their skills, seeing the world through their eyes. It didn't mean that I became a great designer or a great product manager, although I've sort of practiced at both. It meant that I became a better researcher and a better all-round UXer. And I suppose my model of great UX is to work with people who are strong in one area, but also have a lot of skills that are adjacent, that come from the disciplines that they work with, because that, I think, creates a lot of empathy and understanding and creates great teams.
Yeah, I remember one time you said, like, working as a PM, that you got the experience of being a consumer of research rather than a producer of research. And I always felt like that was super interesting to kind of think about it from that perspective. But yeah, okay. What are there any recommendations you have on how UXers can continue to develop their skill sets?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. It's a joy of being in UX that you can always be learning. You can always, be finding out from other people that are around you what they do and how they operate and what matters to them. So as a researcher, I found it fascinating to be a product manager and take the decisions with insight that came from UX research, but also other insight sources and non-research considerations, and have to make those decisions myself. And I learned an awful lot from that. Similarly, writing, similarly, interaction design, and so forth. You can develop a real empathy and a real understanding from putting yourself in the shoes of those people. So I would encourage anyone to do that. It really does round out your understanding. And I suppose as a researcher, I think technical research skills only take you so far. The differentiator, particularly at a senior level, but even at a mid-level for UXers, is more about that understanding of other roles, the soft skills, the influencing, the communication, the creativity, etc. And the ability to understand the value of the work you do, not just be able to execute it better. It's not about writing a better survey when you're at a senior level.
Yeah. Would you say that's kind of the same for ICE, independent contributor, and maybe a management path? Or do you think one is more amenable for those skills?
I think it's true of both.
Okay.
And I also think that the distinction between the two is maybe overstated, in the sense that as an individual contributor, you still have to use almost all of the skills of a manager in terms of influencing, coaching, etc., but perhaps without the formal title. And as a manager, you're doing all those things, but you just have a little bit of extra admin to go with it, of signing off expenses and that sort of stuff, which is not really the core of the job, I would argue. So I think there's more convergence between those two paths than is perhaps recognised, particularly at a senior level. And I would argue that at a more senior level, there's more convergence between all roles anyway. So as a UX research director, I still have to think about legal, HR, finance, and other considerations. It's not as if my lane is just about UX research. So I think having a curiosity about the people around you is just a really good strategy, whatever stage in your career you're at. It will help you partner better with the people you work with, but also at a certain point, you will have to wear all of those hats to some degree anyway. So it just makes sense to be curious.
Yeah, absolutely. UX is such a melting pot of different skills and backgrounds. I came from academia into industry, and I feel like sometimes that can happen is I feel like maybe I'm being treated more as a service, especially because I'm in this very specific UX specialization. I work on this specific team, and I want to make the team happy, and we have certain needs and all of that. But I'm just starting to maybe just churn out stuff and lose sight of what brought me into research in the first place, and what makes me passionate about what I do. Do you think that people can lose sight of what brought them into UX in the first place? And if so, what are some ways to maybe avoid that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Particularly when the team is moving really fast, maybe when things aren't easy, sometimes as a team, things aren't going your way. You launch a product and it doesn't do what you thought it was going to do. And it can end up feeling a bit like you're in a repetitive cycle of doing relatively low interest, low value research without feeling a sense of ownership of it. That's the worst place to be as a UX researcher. But I think getting out of it builds on some of the things that I've mentioned already. So understanding how the people you work with see UX research is critical. Have they had bad experiences before? Is there a mental model that they have of research which you can work with or help them to evolve? That some of those considerations are important. Another one is just whether you as a researcher are unconsciously commodifying the work you do as well. I think sometimes as researchers, we're so keen to be helpful and be contributing that we operate in a way that implies that our time or our work is relatively low value. If somebody says to you, this survey, we need some changes, and you say, well, I can do that in an hour, that implies that it's a very, very easy thing to do. Not that you're super hardworking, just that it's a very, very easy thing to do. And so we fall into this trap sometimes. And I think it's important to be a good team player, but not to commodify the work that we do. And so a better way to be a good team player is to understand your role in the team and to understand everyone else's role in the team and how we all work together. What's really needed when somebody says, I need this thing now? What are they trying to do with that? What do they think it's going to do to help them? And if you understand that, you will end up in a much better place than if you just scramble to do it. So it's really about having a kind of more zoomed out view of where research fits within the operations of a team, but also not being a pushover in those situations as well.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, I think.
Delicate balance, I agree.
Great. So for my last question, as someone with quite a bit of leadership experience, do you have any advice on how to effectively run a research team?
So that's a really great question. And I think I will struggle to give you a concise answer to it, but let me share some top of mind thoughts. So I think it comes down, fundamentally, it's about the value that we bring to the people on the team and the value that we bring to the organization that we're a part of. So it's two related value propositions that we need to get right. The value to the people on the team. Why should anyone choose to work on my research team? What's in it for them? I need to have good answers to that question. And those answers need to evolve over time. And I need to continually be thinking about what value am I delivering for people on the team? Because fundamentally, a research team is about the quality and the motivation and the happiness of the people that are on it. And if I keep thinking, what would it take for people to be happy on this team? What would it take for people to be growing and developing and staying in love with research on the team? And what would it take for them to be productive and able to deliver in a way that's impactful? If I keep answering those questions for all of the people on the team, then I think we're generally speaking going to be in a good place culturally and in terms of as individuals. And that then relates to hiring. And I think as a manager of a research team, 80% of the difference you can make, for good or for bad, is in how you hire. If you are able to attract and persuade the right people to join your team, then a lot of the rest of it takes care of itself. And the reverse is true as well. So that's that value proposition. Why should you join my team? Why should you stay on my team? What are you getting out of this in terms of yourself and your personal growth? Those are the questions that I need to answer. So that's one value proposition, the people. The other value proposition is the organization. And here, I think we need to be really clear about what the use of user research is. What do we bring? Why would we as an organization invest in user research rather than headcount that's spent on something else or budget that's spent on something else? And I think we just need to be really honest with ourselves about those answers. So what do we bring? Well, the classic answer is that we de-risk product launches. We spot things that are expensive to fix by the time you've coded them and address them at the conceptual stage or at the mocks frame. And that's true, and that's really valuable, but it is quite a reductive way of thinking about what we do. I think at a higher level, what we do is we bring alignment, we bring clarity of purpose, and you could argue we bring inspiration and a sense of mission to a team. And those higher level goals sometimes go missing, but fundamentally, I think the role of UX research is to remind everyone, regardless of their role on the team, why they're there, why they do what they do, and why that matters. And sometimes that's about telling some hard truths about how we're not serving our users well. And sometimes it's about sharing good news and reminding people that actually we are succeeding, we are doing things right. Look, we can inspire ourselves by just recognizing that we are making our users' lives better, and taking a creative leap from that, taking a leap of motivation from that. And I think it's particularly pertinent in recent times in tech where it's been tough. There's been layoffs, there's been I think a generally quite somber mood in the industry. It's important to remind ourselves that the work we do makes a difference and it matters to our users and we're making people's lives better every day. So I think that is the other side of the value proposition for what we're doing as a research team. And if you balance those two value propositions, my experience is that generally research is valued, is respected, is invested in, and it feels like a great place for the people who work in it as well.